Hi, I'm Michelle Frye, editor at Knopf & Crown Books for Young Readers, and I'm sitting here today with Christopher Paolini, the author of The Inheritance Cycle and of Brisingr, the book that you are listening to right now. Hi, Christopher.
Hi.
I'm going to ask you a few questions just to chat a little about Brisingr and about your writing process and have a conversation with you. Question for you. What is it like for you to sit down and write a new book? How do you start a book, and do you miss the characters in between books?
Actually, I do miss the characters. Since I just finished Brisingr, I was just working on a short story for my own amusement, and about a few pages into it, I walked over and found my mom, and I was telling her that I found I was missing writing about Aragon and Saphira and Arya and all the other characters from Alagasia. I've been with them so long now. Actually, this year, 2008, when Brisingr is being released, this marks the 10th year since I began the Inheritance Cycle.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time to live with these characters.
It is, and I've found that I've become very, very comfortable with them. It's easy for me to slip into their voices. I've done so much with Aragon at this point, and Saphira and the other characters, that writing a scene from their point of view or about them is... I won't say it's easy at this point. I mean, writing is never easy, but it's comfortable. So as far as how I approach writing a new book, I would probably approach a book outside of this series a little bit differently, but in general, my approach for each book in the Inheritance Cycle has been to plot out the main events of the book in fairly explicit detail, usually about a paragraph or so for every main event that happens. Mm-hmm. And I try to get a good feel for where the story's going, the general flow and arc of and structure of the plot. And I usually spend a few weeks or a month on that, just trying to nail that down to my satisfaction, and then I dive in and start chewing away. And of course, when I'm actually writing the book, the outline, although it serves as a useful guide, I don't adhere to it religiously. I feel free to make changes and alter things as I'm going along, because sometimes something that seemed to make sense before I began the book no longer makes sense when I'm actually in the scene with the characters and they want to do something other than what I had originally planned.
Do you have an example of that from Brisingr, a moment that deviated from your original plan?
Sure. When Aragon finds Sloane in Hellgrind. Mm-hmm. When I was first imagining the overall structure of the book, I had thought that I might have Aragon kill Sloane.
Wow.
Well, there were a lot of reasons for it. I mean, Sloane had committed all these crimes, and taking Sloane back, I mean, he would have only been executed in any case for his crimes. So I thought, well, Aragon is a dragon rider, and I don't want to maybe drag out the storyline anymore. I could just have him kill Sloane. But when I actually got to that point in the story, and Aragon was there staring at the butcher, and it just didn't feel right to go in that direction with Aragon. It didn't feel like Aragon would do that. Maybe Roran would have done it, maybe. Certainly Arya might have done it, or I know Saphira would have done it. She would have just eaten Sloane.
And a tasty meal, too.
And a tasty meal, but not Aragon. So, and as a result of that decision, the book ended up being a good 100 pages longer, I'd say, because then everything that happened afterward with Aragon having to run back to the Varden, and Roran and Katrina flying back to the Varden on Saphira, and all the scenes with Nasawada and Roran at the Varden while Aragon's returning to the Varden, none of that was originally in the story. So, and that was actually one reason the book ended up getting split into two then, because it got so long.
This episode was added.
Mm-hmm.
A full day of writing.
It is, and it's weird because as a career, this is definitely a career of extremes. One day I'll be sitting at my desk, not having left the house for a month, and the next day I'm, talking in front of a crowd somewhere, and it's a real switch, and both elements of the process require different skills, and I've known some writers who have excelled at both, and I've known some writers who excel at one and don't excel at the other, and they don't necessarily go hand in hand, doing the sort of the promotion and public relations aspect of a writer's life with the writing, and it's something that it helps to keep separate it helps me to keep the two separate, actually. So I don't write when I'm out and traveling, and I don't do talks and stuff when I'm at home.
That makes sense.
Actually, it's funny because when I write, I'm not even aware of this sometimes, but I say things out loud oftentimes, trying out the sound of the words or the way a sentence is.
Sure.
When my sister and I used to have rooms very close together in the house we grew up in, and she used to get so annoyed with me because she could hear me talking
aloud,
reading the sentences out loud, and I remember she'd come and say, stop doing that, be quiet. I said, I'm not doing anything, and
you didn't even notice you were doing it.
No, but now I have my own space to work in, and it's, I can talk as much as I like.
Now, he and Aragon have both become very strong over the course of these past couple of books. And have you ever found yourself kind of written into a corner in terms of magic?
Well, I have written scenes where I write it the way I want to write it, the way I originally envisioned it, and 2 weeks later, when I'm working on a different chapter, I'll suddenly think, wait a minute, why didn't he do this? Why didn't he just use this or that? Like when, for example, in Brisingr, when Aragon and Murtagh fight,
right.
One of the questions was, well, why wouldn't Aragon use the energy that's in the ring that he got from Brom?
Right.
And those questions have to be answered, because when I was growing up and I was reading a lot of fantasy at a certain point, I remember having lots of questions like that myself, and I won't name books here, but there were plenty of occasions where you had characters who could use magic, and I'd say, well, okay, they're in a fight, they're in this difficult situation, why doesn't he just cast a spell to get him out of it? One way authors have gotten around this, and something that I think I might do in the future, is to set up a more limited system of magic. Mm-hmm. Something that only works under certain circumstances, or that's much more limited in terms of power or strength, that just isn't as flexible, can't be used for as wide a range of circumstances.
Right.
That's one of the nice contrasts between Aragon and Roran. Roran has to fight his way out of any situation, pretty much. He has to just rely on his own body and his brute strength. Whereas Aragon, he can pretty much get out of most any situation at this point. However, he has to become this powerful if he's to have even a slight fighting chance against Murtagh, and we're not even going to mention Galbatorix here, because he's still not as powerful as Galbatorix.
Right, he's still working on getting that fighting chance against Galbatorix.
Yeah. On one hand, it's almost like a superhero story, where we have Aragon gradually becoming more than human. Now he's sort of half-elf, half-human, mm-hmm. and he has all this incredible power, and the question is, how do you keep the character real at that point? Part of it is giving him emotional problems instead of just physical problems.
Sure. And it is quite a burden on him, this entire battle, so there's certainly a lot of emotional heft to his life just based on the circumstances that he finds himself in.
And of course the other half of the solution is giving him more and more dangerous enemies.
He has that as well. Do you have a favorite scene in Brisingr, or a scene that was a favorite scene to write?
Oh boy. I think I have a number of favorite scenes throughout the book. I like the scene where Saphira fuses or heals the Star Sapphire among the dwarves. I love the scene where Aragon and Arya are sitting around the campfire and Arya makes the grass ship that flies off into the night.
Beautiful.
All the scenes between Roran and Katrina in their tent late at night were special favorites of mine. I loved writing those. I think that they just really have a connection none of the other characters really share.
I love those scenes too. They felt really intimate and connected to me.
Well, and one of the nice things about their relationship is that when the series begins and when we first start seeing scenes from Roran's point of view in Eldest, he's already courted Katrina. He's already won Katrina, and we don't need to see them going through that. They already have a relationship. Of course, when he rescues her then in this book, it's just sort of a confirmation of what they both already knew. So I get to show sort of a different kind of relationship with them than exists between, say, Aragon and Arya, who are just sort of dancing around each other.
Right. Yeah, you really feel the history between Roran and Katrina.
And actually, I don't want to embarrass them here too much, but Roran and Katrina's relationship is really based on my parents.
Wow.
I've seen them share sort of moments like that. I mean, they trust each other implicitly. Actually, a lot of Roran is based on my dad, to be honest. I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever, that if anything had ever happened to my mom,